Vomhoff, Vomhof.
Yeah. No, I have not familiar with that name.
Yeah, he posts some really, really pretty pictures of the downtown area. And he actually recommended that I come downtown to fly when I said that I was having problems with being in the controls Class C zones.
Yeah.
And apparently the downtown area is just outside of that circle of the airport.
Yeah, so Linda has a lot of experience in downtown Louisville, so maybe she can share some knowledge with that.
Downtown, did you say Louisville?
Yeah, they keep that in Kentucky.
Is that where you live, Linda?
Yes, that's where I'm from. Well, that's where I live now.
Oh, cool.
I tell you, the gentleman that will be on, I think at 12, Don does a lot of downtown video and stills with his drone. He's my mentor. He's been very helpful on navigating that whole territory.
Downtown
11 o'clock our time.
or downtown Milwaukee,
Louisville.
Louisville.
Well, just navigating in difficult airspaces and getting your permission and getting your waivers.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about during the second hour. And I've
Yep.
downloaded the maps where I can see, what's the name of the app? Yeah, Air Map. And I can see the areas that are controlled zones, but I know there's a way to ask for an automated permission to fly for recreational flyers, but I haven't figured out how to request that permission yet.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we can get that. We got to get started here. So we'll do that in the second hour. We're going to get started because we're about 3 minutes late on my end. So sorry about that, everybody. But welcome, everyone. Looks like we got a small group. I think there's a lot of people out shooting fall color, what little bit there is up here in Wisconsin. And I understand there's a WEIR meeting going on, so we've got a few people missing from there. But welcome to Digital Forum. We're going to, the first hour, we're going to just do general discussion. The second hour, we'll be talking about drones. We have Linda here, and Don will be joining us at the second hour time, which for us is 11 o'clock. I believe for him it's 12. But other than that, we'll get started. So anybody have questions? Anything but drones. We don't want to talk about drones till the second hour. So, and I see we're slowly getting more people in. So, and if there's anybody out there in the attendees that want to join the panel, please raise your Zoom hand and we will bring you in. Although we'll be stopping that very soon. So raise your hand if you want to come in yet. So does anybody, both the attendees, you attendees that are watching on the sidelines, you do have a job, and that's to ask questions. Put it in the Q&A and we will ask them. Otherwise, we're going to be stumbling around for this first hour talking about this and that and everything. I do have a few things that I was going to ask, if hopefully maybe our panel has some knowledge on it, but if not, we'll move on. But anybody either on the panel or in the attendees have a question?
Hey Jeff, good morning.
Morning.
Question for you. I'm so interested. There's a event in Houston, Texas. In the end of November is the international table tennis championship event. Wondering, do you have any connection with them? We can, if we get press permission, credential get in to take picture.
No.
No? Okay.
No.
So anything
Yeah.
else in the Wisconsin area, like such as the Bloor events, so Box and also Packers. Do you have any connection with them?
No, that stuff gets really hard to get in. You really need to be associated with like a magazine, newspaper, or something like that to get into most of those. It's either that or you need to know somebody in the organization. Sometimes you can get that stuff worked out.
Yeah,
I used
also have
to,
connection with the Pettit Center, Ice Center, so I can get in to take some skating or
yeah,
skating stuff. So
yeah, I used to, well, sometimes you can, it's good if you plan ahead to talk to whoever's coordinating the event and let them know that you're interested in taking photos. Ken and I did that at a volleyball tournament on the uh, beach there. Ken actually walked up and talked to the organizer, and they gave us press credentials, and we were able to shoot all day in an area that nobody else could shoot at.
oh,
And we got some really great volleyball shots, and it was a fun day. We were burned out by the end of the day, but sometimes it's best if you work ahead of time and talk to the people that organize it, or the actual place, and then you can a lot of times get credentials. But you need to do it ahead and not like we did at the volleyball. We just happened to get lucky and caught them, and we just sent them a whole ton of pictures, which they appreciated, and
Yep.
said we could come back and do it next year. And that's how you get started on a lot of that stuff.
Yep.
Linda, you shoot in a lot of events. You got anything to add?
Yeah, I know I do a ton of events, and I know I have a lot of friends that are very envious at the amount of events that I do and who I photograph. And they're always asking me, how do I get a credential? Usually you have to represent, like you said, a publication, a news service. They will not let anybody in just on your own name to do fine art. That's not how it works. And that process starts probably 2 weeks before the event happens. That request has to go into their publicity team, their law firms, their whole constituents of who they want to allow in to photograph that. If they would allow everybody, the photo pits of concerts and those things would just be full of 200 people. And often they're restricted to under 6. And I know that when I do music concerts, you don't get to photograph the whole event. You only photograph the first 3 songs or the first song, depending on the artist and their people on what they want out in the media public. So yeah, start way ahead, make a contact. And you have to represent somebody. That's how that works for bands, sporting events, concerts, things like that. That's from the arena that I'm familiar with.
Thanks. Good tip.
Yeah.
Great
I know at
question.
Road America you can do it, but you end up paying to be able to get the vest sometimes. And the only way at Road America you really can get a vest to shoot racing is to be connected with some sort of media setup. So
Yeah, I took a couple of times the Road American race, and also a couple of the speed skating, air show. I just wonder if I can get in more closer, in the
yep.
in the field.
Yeah, no, it's really a matter of making those connections, and that's a tough thing to do. You really need to be hooked up with media.
So freelance is not welcomed in most events. It sounds like
Yeah,
freelancers. So
sure.
Jeff, I think Tony had a question.
Yeah, Tony, go ahead.
Yep, you're
Oh,
muted,
you're
Tony.
muted yet.
I have shaky hands, so I have to hold the mouse down to unmute and mute. Anyway, So I have shaky hands, and I was shooting wildlife, and I just they're all just a little fuzzy, no matter. What are some quick, easy settings to, I've experimented, but I'm not having much luck. What should I shoot at? ISO and
Let's
whatever.
start with where you're at there, Tony. I mean, what are your current settings? What are you trying to use right now? So that'll help us determine where to go.
Well, in manual, I have a hard time figuring out what to use. So I've been shooting auto, which I know is not the best, but my playing around with settings, I haven't been that successful either, on manual. But now that I'm thinking about it, maybe shutter speed is the way to go.
Yeah. So,
Shutter.
so you're trying to shoot birds and wildlife. Is that
Yes.
okay?
And in particular, a week ago, we were 10 feet away from buffalo
Well,
Gosh.
it's,
In
pretty
bad-
close to Buffalo. Yeah.
in Custer National Park.
Were they? Were you out for the roundup, or were you right after
No.
the roundup?
We were just sightseeing.
It's the only place I found the buffalo in Custer 2 weeks ago was they had rounded them up, so they were all up in the penned in area. So
These are out crossing the
they were
road.
okay. So you must have hit it just right. But anyway, so yeah, your shutter speed, you're obviously going to want to have that up, as high as you comfortably can. With today's modern cameras, that's not hard to achieve because we can move up our ISOs to what once was an uncomfortable level and be quite comfortable with it, to be able to achieve a higher shutter speed. So I know, all the action that I shoot, my two criteria, I shoot everything in aperture priority, but my two criteria is, getting a good shutter speed, but also getting a good aperture to let light in because I'm usually shooting at night. But if you're a little soft, it might very well be from your kind of a combination of both, or just not having a fast enough shutter speed. Ken?
Okay. So let start out with shutter priority. And
Well, actually, I shoot aperture, but you can do it either way. It works both. I think Brian and Ken had some input to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I shoot. Go ahead, Ken.
I was reading an article the other day, and what they're recommending for mammals is a shutter speed of 1/1000 will cover almost all mammal type of situations. So what you can do is you can go to manual, set your shutter speed at 1/1000. You can go to your aperture. Generally, you want everything out of focus other than the subject, so you use a low aperture, and then you can set your ISO to auto and let the camera adjust the auto for you. But for most animals and birds, you want a minimum of 1/1000. In some cases, you can get by with 1/500. Early morning and late afternoon are the hardest times where the light is low. So you maybe have to go with 1/500 during those brief times, and then 1/1000 the rest of it. Birds, you want to be at 1/2000 when you can, and especially if they're ready to take off, or if they're in flight. It's even recommended nowadays to go to 1/3000 for birds in flight. But it depends on the bird too and how close they are. If it's a duck flying close to you and flying by you, you're going to need the 1/3000. If it's a big blue heron or a great egret and they're just a reasonable distance away, you can probably get by with 1/2000.
thank you.
but that's what's causing your problems is your shutter speed is probably not fast enough. And then, so basically you want a fast shutter speed.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
also-
I would just reiterate that I shoot all my wildlife in manual, so just go to wide open, as much as you can with that particular lens. Open it up, f3, f4, f5, whatever you can get. Auto ISO, certainly. And then shutter speed, if you're having trouble with shaking, you're out in Custer, so it's probably wide open daylight, at least it was when we were there. Just go to your shutter speed as high as you can with a decent ISO. You might even be up at, during the day, you could be at 1/2000th without any problem. It's just, early morning and then going into the evening, that's when you're going to have to maybe reduce your shutter speed a little bit to, and see how you're doing, do a little pixel peeping and, but during the day, just get your shutter speed up there as high as you can, wide open and auto ISO, and you should be okay.
It was a very interesting day because it started out overcast. And then when we're in the hills before we got to the park and back, it was a blizzard with 45-mile-an-hour winds. And when we got to a hotel, it was 2 inches of slush.
Wow.
Yeah, besides what Ken and Brian said, because I already use R5, R5 have the animal eye detector. That's very critical feature right now with the mirrorless camera. Eye detector, you can enable that, and also focus. You use the server mode, and which means continue focus. Follow the animal, especially birds.
Good point.
Yeah. So yeah. Besides, I think the Brian and Ken said is very basic for concept, but with new equipment, especially mirrorless new one, you better enable the eye detector for animal and use the continuous server type of the focus mode.
Good point on
That's
focusing.
Yeah.
How heavy of a lens are you using? Are you using a big telephoto? Do you need a monopod?
Yeah, sure. If you use like I use a Canon, I use the Canon 400 f2.8. That'd be a huge monster. So that actually take the very sharp, like the Hummingbird, Blue Jay, all of that stuff. But you could use a 300, even 200. I use 200 f2. That's also get a very good one.
Tony,
What kind of
what
Tony,
size
what lens
lens
are
are
you
you
using?
I was using I switched between lenses. One's a 55 to 240, which I don't use that often, but no matter which lens, even the kit lens, I have what they call tremors. I can hardly write, decently. So that's the problem. It's my hands, not the lens.
Yeah.
Oh
Very
yeah,
right.
use the
Monopod would help.
monopod is another tip. I always try to, because you use the huge telescope lens, so it's very heavy. So better use the monopod. Give you a little stabilize your body and the lens.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I do a lot of bird photography, and generally I'm using a lens that's around 200 to 600. But if you're getting close to that 600, minimally you're looking at 1/600th of a second. That's the minimum you should be using.
Yep.
But in birds, it's typical, like they were saying, to have 1/1000, 1/2000. And again, if you're having trouble holding the camera steady, you do need to be up at those 1/1000, 1/2000 kind of numbers. And anything you can use to stabilize the lens or the camera, like they're saying, monopods are great. Or if you ever have to buy, you can put them certainly on a tripod, but sometimes people find that the tripods are hard to move around. But if you buy a gimbal, and sometimes those are on sale for about $150, they can be really nice for helping you move smoothly as a bird is flying, and they will get rid of a lot of the shake that I think you're experiencing.
That's absolutely right, Ken.
Yeah, too, you can use, you know, the hood of your car, you know, rest your arms against the hood of the car
With the car off.
with the car off,
Yeah.
not running.
I have a question.
You don't want the car in motion, no.
I have a question for, I know if you, any guy here to pre-order Canon R3 yet, which is the biggest monster for the bird, animal or sports shooting.
I missed the first part of that, Ray. Do Canon what?
R3 is it's like the mirrorless version of the Canon 1DX Mark III.
Well,
It will be
Yeah,
next month. Will be released next month.
Yeah, I don't know if we have anybody that's shooting the Canon R3 in the group today.
No,
But they're almost the same for all of the
Nikon.
mirrorless.
Yeah.
You know, there's all been good points here. Higher shutter speeds. I know I have the same problem, Tony, as you're having lately. When I'm shooting at the racetrack, I found I had to up my shutter speeds 1 or 2 settings. I now shoot at a 1,000th of a second. I used to be able to shoot at 1/500th and get good sharp pictures. But the other thing too is make sure image stabilization is on. Like Linda mentioned, a monopod really can help steady you. It gets you that extra point source to keep you know, the camera a little more steady and helps in that quite a bit. Auto ISO is a great suggestion to keep that shutter speed up. I shoot lately when I'm shooting at the racetrack now, I shoot in shutter priority because I'm more interested in my shutter speed being high and letting my f-stop generally will fall at the widest opening. So that's worked good for me along with auto ISO. So been a lot of good suggestions there. We do have Ken Bowman suggested too to help with your softer pictures to try the, I believe that's Topaz Sharpen AI. That would certainly help. Photoshop does have a thing to help sharpen photos slightly. It doesn't do an amazing job, but it can make a slight difference. So that's something else you could look at. I think it's in the filter section of it. So
All right, thanks everyone for all the suggestions. I will try this in the coming weeks.
So Tony,
Tony-
last thing for this, we cannot guarantee you can get every picture sharp for the birds or animal shooting.
Oh, I understand that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
sometimes
So
have to take 50,
if you
60
get like
shots.
60%, that would be great.
Yeah.
6 grand
Yeah.
per shot, that would be great.
Tony, I think just one last thing to touch is, I don't think you're ever, especially with the animals, you're probably never really gonna get a sharp image if you're on auto, because auto doesn't know you're shooting fast moving animals, or that you're shaking a little bit more than it's expecting. So definitely, like it's been mentioned, aperture, shutter, or manual priority, all three will work. It just takes a little bit of practice to dial in those settings and figure it out. So just stick with those, and I think you'll get it.
Yeah, well, I understand that nothing's, most of these are just shots of our vacation, and they're not bad for that. But that's why I could never enter a contest, because I just, they're soft. And occasionally out of 50 shots, I might get one good one. And, I understand all that. It's just, I was just needed a direction, and I appreciate all the comments. Thank you.
yeah, and the best suggestion I could say is up your shutter speed and up your ISO up. The new cameras, the ISOs work great for going to the higher ISOs. And that's what I found has helped me quite a bit lately, because I've had the same problem shooting at the racetrack. I just, that and putting it on a tripod, which is, I know, a big pain, but a tripod does wonders for getting you sharper pictures.
If you're shooting a buffalo, it's not moving that fast usually.
Yep.
You
And
can
besides,
take the
it's got
buffalo
a
with-
tripod to run into before it gets to you. So one way to
Well-
slow them down.
Well, with a couple of these buffalo, like I said, they were 10 feet from me and we were in the car. And
Right.
he stood there looking at us, sticking out his tongue.
Yep. Yep.
Well, you know, shooting
Okay.
one last thing, if I may, if you're shooting from the car and if you're on the side of the car, you know, where the buffalo, shoot from the car and rest your camera on the window frame. You understand what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
I carry a beanbag so that it
Yeah, use a
helps
beanbag.
absorb some of the vibration. And Brian's got a great point. You know, shoot from the car. It helps though to turn the car off. If you got the car running, that is going to add some vibration, unless you have it on a beanbag or something that will help absorb that vibration a little bit.
It's my
But-
wife's car, which is a hybrid. So when we're parked, there's no vibration. at all.
Oh, okay. Well, that's hey, there's a good point for having a hybrid car.
And you can't even hear it.
Yep. Yep. No, that really works nice.
Just a quick
Okay.
suggestion for the window thing. If you buy that pipe insulation that goes around the pipes, it's a foam kind of a round thing. It slides over water pipes to keep them from dripping or cooling down or heating up, whatever. You cut a section of that and just slide it over your window. So then you'll have a nice soft thing for your camera to rest on. And it's a little bigger shelf than just the thickness of the window.
Yeah,
that's what you do.
that's an excellent, and I happen to have some.
Real easy to use. Very
Yeah.
easy to use. And you can throw it in
Thank
your
you.
car and leave it in your car all the time.
Yeah.
There you go.
Good point. Okay, we have Ken Bowman would like to know if anybody knows anything about the new Luminar. I don't think it's Zero, it's
No,
Nero, isn't it?
You know, yeah. Yeah. I'll be honest, I have not really looked into it myself yet, other than just a cursory look, and I think he's kind of right in this kind of, so does anyone know anything about new Luminar Neo? What does it do besides remove power lines, and when is it supposed to be released? Well, I think if you've got, basically from everything I've kind of watched on it so far, which hasn't been an awful lot, if you've got AI, I'm not so sure it's going to offer you a whole lot more. Unfortunately, Luminar made I'm going to consider it a bad business decision. And instead of upgrading AI, they basically created yet another new program. And it does most of the things that AI does, but it adds in a couple minor features. So I guess it's going to be a personal call whether you think it's worth purchasing another program. I think most of the things you could do in AI. So that's what I found out.
I could be
yeah.
wrong, but it looked to me like, I think, Jeff, you had shown in Photoshop that new section, was it called Nero or whatever? It does crazier things like letting you make somebody smile when they're not and do all these different things. I think from what I'm seeing, that's kind of where this is going. It's going into this being able to find things and do things for you that if you did them manually would be more difficult. I think that's where this is starting to go.
And I think you're partly right on that, Jim. I think it's kind of really keying in on more of the portrait aspect of things than it is, say, for what we've been talking about, or the type of photographers most of us are. So if you're doing a lot of more studio-ish type or portrait type work, it may be something to look at. But overall, it's a little more targeted.
Yeah,
Right. Well, I've seen the same thing, and it's backgrounds and stuff like that it's going to be doing that are different.
I'm
Right.
looking at it right now, and it's funny because their demo is the power line removal, but the poles are still in the shot after it removes all the lines. So it's just a funny thing as I'm looking at it, they got little swipey things so you can see
Yeah.
the before, the after. It's like, Poles are still there though. Something to keep in
Yeah.
mind.
They're new poles, Ian. They're new poles.
Yeah, I think it's just Luminar's way of going to a subscription type thing, but instead you're subscribing once a year and you're buying a new program. I'm having a hard time trying to decide whether I'd want to go to it. I generally buy a lot of the Luminar and On1 photo apps, and I'm trying to decide because I'm hardly using any of them anymore. I'm mainly back to Photoshop and Lightroom, and occasionally going to Luminar and actually Nik Filters. Those are the two that I generally use, and I think I'm dropping my On1 subscription because I just don't even use On1. I used to use it for portraits, but don't. So that was going to be a question since Ken asked it. I was going to ask that same question. You know, is everybody upgrading to the latest new software? Are you sitting back and watching to see, you know, I'm saving my money because Photoshop is doing so much of this stuff now too, and it with its tools, it does just about what the Luminar is doing. So, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
I guess I did go to the On1 2020, but one of the reasons I did it was they've integrated plugins for it now where I can make a round trip to Luminar and back, and I found that quite appealing because I do use both programs.
Yeah. Yeah, Ian, were you gonna say something?
No, I was going to kind of agree. I find myself doing more and more predominantly just in Lightroom, and then flip over to Photoshop when I need to do a lot of the cleanup stuff because the healing and the cloning, and there's no content aware stuff in Lightroom, for example. But less, you know, I bought Luminar AI and I played with it for a few days, but usually I kind of forget about it at this point.
Yeah, I'm I'm finding, yeah, I started studying how I've been processing my images, and with what Photoshop can do, I'm more fluid in Photoshop than I am in Luminar and all that, and I just don't need some of that extra stuff. So Photoshop has worked really well for me. I know Marty's mainly based in Luminar and On1, but yeah, I'm slowing down. I'm probably stopping a lot of my subscriptions to some of these other plugins and just picking one or two.
Yeah, and I think that's not a bad thing, Jeff. I mean, to find what works for you and then stick with and build on that.
Yep.
I mean, there are a lot of great programs out there. It's almost mind-boggling, but then where do you put your dollars? And you put your dollars where what makes the best resource for you, I guess.
Yeah.
Let
Yeah,
me say,
I have. Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, I have found that I got into a workflow of starting in Lightroom and doing 90% of my adjustments there, but I then move out into On1 because the sharpening there is way better than anything that I've used in Photoshop or Lightroom because of the way they do it. And I love their, they have a vignette that is absolutely amazing. It does some things that other vignettes don't like to do. It sometimes will preserve some of the brights, but bring down the darks and gives a really natural looking edge to it. But there are a few other things they've now added in their program, a denoise, which I would say currently rivals Topaz's. And that is really nice because you can send it in, it works on your raw photo. So it's basically holding it in the raw. You can make all these adjustments, send it back into Lightroom, and then you can continue working on it in Lightroom or in Photoshop if you need heavy lifting. But it's a really nice way to end everything up.
Sure. No, it's yeah, everybody has, I think, their way. I know I use Topaz denoise if I get too much noise, but that's just what I use Topaz denoise for. I know some people have mentioned Topaz sharpen, AI. And I have my set of plugins that I use, Boris Effects for special effects, and Topaz for certain, for enlarging and for getting rid of noise, and Luminar for a few special things. But yeah, I still fall back to Photoshop. So, and I'm finding that I'm
Can I just
going
say
back
one-
to Photoshop more and more. Sure, go ahead, Jim.
I just want to add one more thing about On1. On1 is now trying to become a standalone application. And in the past, they used to play extremely well with Lightroom and a lot of the other things as a plug-in. I don't think they like being second fiddle and having to come up to do that. So technically, you can make Lightroom still work as a plug-in. However, they're not warranting that that will work for you, although it works beautifully. They actually want you to buy separate chunks of their program and use those as plugins, and that's separate from their program. So again, maybe someday we can talk about that more, but you can use it. You just have to set it up a certain way in your Lightroom to make it a plugin, and it will work fine. But it wasn't designed that way now in the latest 2022 version.
Oh,
And it's
that's
not
inter-
subscription,
I-
right, Jim? It's not
sorry.
subscription.
It's a subscription by the year, but once you own it, it's good forever. So
Yeah,
they
it's not
just wouldn't
subscription.
update it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, technically it's like all the other ones, you know, if the cameras change and whatever, although your raw photo would be processed in Lightroom if you use it as a, as a plugin. So I don't think that would be a problem in the future, as long as you kept up with your Lightroom subscription and new cameras came out and you had a new camera and you needed that addition.
Right. Yeah. I know I do On1 Photo as a subscription because they do have a yearly subscription fee, which is basically the same thing as everybody else buying it every year, except that you get a few extra bonuses, extra videos, and extra additional packs that you can add into the On1. So, and I'm currently subscribed to that. It's about I think it's $125 a year. And I'm looking seriously at dropping that because I hardly use On1 anymore. And I would just maybe upgrade every other year or something like that. When I was doing portraits, On1 was my basic fallback plugin because it was the best portrait processing program that I found. And the same with Luminar. I generally buy every one that comes out, but I'm certainly not looking at buying this latest one. I think Luminar AI works perfectly fine. So I'm slowing down, but then I'm also not doing as much commercial work anymore. So.
But I'm with you, Jeffrey. I have moved away from these programs, putting money into these programs, and almost anything that they do, I can do. It might take a little longer and a little more work, but I can do in Photoshop or Lightroom plus Photoshop. And I'm not even using DxO anymore. I used the Nik filters for years. And then last year, I think it was, I went ahead and put the money into the DxO when they took the Nik filters and put them out. And I'm not even using them anymore. I'm pretty much doing everything, learned how to do everything. So I'm with you on that. I think that a lot of these are just money-making companies that are trying to get the dollars out of photographers. I think the money would be better spent in lessons and that sort of thing to learn how to do some of that stuff yourself.
Sure. Go ahead, Marty.
So, I think some of this has come about by a number of years ago. I think Adobe got pretty complacent in being the king of the hill. And they were not doing the development of their program to the extent that some of these other Luminars or On1 or Nik or any of those were really finding really great niches and really upping the game. And Photoshop, Adobe rather, really had to kind of win back some of the customers. And it's sounding kind of from some of this conversation that, you know, a lot of us went to other programs to satisfy what we weren't finding with Adobe. And, you know, Adobe has stepped up their game, whether it be Photoshop or Lightroom, and they are winning a lot of these customers back. So I just think there's a lot to be said for that, because otherwise, if these other companies really didn't come in and push like they did, I think we'd still be using CS6, you know.
Yeah, that's a good
Yep.
point.
As an Adobe shareholder, I like what I'm hearing.
Me too.
Well, until Adobe does away with their subscription thing, I will never give them another dime, but that's just me.
Yeah,
I
and that's-
was hesitant to get the subscription too, but I've been on their subscription for 2 or 3 years now, and I love it. I'm actually paying less money in the long run, I think, than it costs to upgrade, and I'm getting the latest and greatest every time they release something. Of course, I'm also getting the bugs, and they're introducing bugs, and they usually fix them fairly quickly. But when they do their releases, you're getting the bugs too.
yeah.
Yeah, until
Yeah,
a
it's-
subscription, I didn't have Photoshop, at least not officially. So the subscription let me get Photoshop. So
Yeah, it saved me in the long run a ton of money doing the subscription, because I have their whole suite of products because I needed them for my work, and I was paying $600 to $900 a year for their products, and now I'm paying $55 a month, which still is not cheap, but it's still getting me a ton of products that they have that I use almost every day, and a lot less expensive, and they're putting out new improvements about every 6 to 8 weeks, which is really nice for that part of it. But
Are you?
yeah, I
using
can
the
understand, Marty.
Are you, Jeffrey, are you using the cloud space that they give you?
I use a small amount of it for certain things that I need to store for different projects that I use over and over again. I only get about 200, I think it's 200 gigabytes of cloud space. So I keep certain fonts up there. I keep certain company logos up there. Stuff like that that I can then access from multiple. For a while, I was working with multiple computers. I've now sort of grouped myself back down to one computer that I work at. I moved my work office to my house, so before I would start at the house and do some stuff and then go to work and have to pull that project down from their cloud. So I would store it in the cloud while I'm working on it, and then I could access it from any of my computers. So that part works, but I don't store a ton of stuff. It's more of the bits and pieces that you need for a project. I store in the Adobe Cloud. So,
All right, Tony.
and sometimes,
I'm change of topic, but first I'll say I'm still using CS6 because I don't need anything more. But anyway, I've noticed that, okay, I shoot both RAW and JPEG in my Canon. And when I would download them into my computer, there would be the 2 files, one JPEG, one RAW for the same image. Now, I'm only getting JPEG, but it's actually the RAW file. It's huge. So I've been able to, so I'm wondering, have I done something wrong in Photoshop or whatever, or is it RAW to JPEG and the Adobe thing? I don't know.
Tony, what camera are you using?
Canon Rebel T8i.
And where are you importing them to? Into the browser or into, how are you, what's your import process?
Oh, it's a Canon
You're going in, okay, so you're going in digital professional. That's probably a setting in Canon's digital professional then.
Well, it could also, since he's working in CS6,
Files.
he may the camera may not be supported by CS6 anymore by the raw converter. That would be my first guess. I don't know the Canon T9. How old is it, Tony?
March. Yeah,
Of
it's the
this year?
latest, it's the latest Rebel.
It's the latest. That's why you're not able to see it in Photoshop.
Well,
Because
it's not that I can't see it in Photoshop. I'm using the Canon software to download. And
okay,
then I use Photoshop and Bridge to open the files. But
right.
but when I download it, it's instead of showing me the JPEG and the RAW, it's just showing me a JPEG, which is the RAW.
Right, which that's why I'm thinking there's a setting I'd have to bring up my, I can bring that up here. You might have unchecked something in DPP that would show them both.
Are the files showing up on your hard drive? Period.
Oh yes, they're
Without
on the
going
hard
through
drive.
any.
They're in
It's
a folder.
on the hard drive.
Yeah, and it's in a folder,
Okay.
but it only the format says all JPEG, but when I open them up, they're huge. They are the raw files.
Yeah, I
So
think,
it,
well,
it,
yeah, I think if I had a card in here, I could probably tell you I don't have a card when I open up the program, but I know there's a checkbox for that to import one, both, or one or the other or both.
Yeah.
okay, I will check that again. Thank you.
And the extension is JPEG, not RAW, on the file name.
Correct.
Are we sure
Yeah,
this
if-
isn't a compatibility issue though, since he is on? Didn't you say Photoshop 6? CS6?
Right,
Yeah.
but it's not it shows it only as a JPEG before I do any importing on Photoshop or anything. Where
Right,
it used
so
to be,
When you're bringing them into digital Canon or Canon's digital professional app, you're only seeing the JPEG there. You're not seeing JPEG and the RAW, correct?
correct.
Okay, yeah, that's where I think it's a setting in there for you that.
Yeah, it
Let's see.
could be a setting in there if for downloading. Maybe you're not downloading both. You're downloading it through the Canon professional software.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
that could be something in the software that you check that you only want to download either the JPEG or just the RAW file.
Yeah, I haven't
Um,
checked anything. It's just their latest version of the Canon software. So maybe it's automatic somewhere and I never thought to look.
Yeah,
Exactly, there might have been an update or something, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there might be a checkbox or something that says that you need to check this to download everything. But what you need to do is stay out of any program and just go into the file folder that you have those images and check to see if it says just JPEG or what is the raw CR something.
Yeah, well, that's what I do. When I
Yeah.
download it, I go into the folder and the whole works is JPEG.
Just JPEG.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
assuming, Tony's assuming that it's JPEG just because of the file size. I
Yeah.
guess I would go back to the camera. You said it's a newer camera. You just bought it. And make sure that you're capturing it as a RAW. And go back to your camera settings, Tony. Have you checked there in your camera settings?
Yeah, yes, it is. It's both JPEG and RAW,
Okay.
but in the file folder, it's all JPEG, but they're huge like the RAW files and I can process them like RAW files.
Can I
Okay.
just say the one thing that you will have to be careful of, and Jeff had mentioned this, and that is if you do get them to come in as actual raw files, there is a very good chance your Photoshop will not accept them because it's CS6, it doesn't recognize that camera. So you may have to keep them as JPEGs, even though you would like to bring them in as RAWs. It may not work that way.
Yeah.
But in the
Oh,
file
it-
folder in
agree.
Explorer, he says he just sees JPEG.
Right, I
Yeah.
understand that, but what I'm saying is if he ever gets them to become true raw files, they go .cr. He may actually try to open them and they won't be able to be deciphered by CS6. There's no software in there to decode those photos.
Oh,
Right.
in my previous camera, which was the a 7, Photoshop CS6 had no problem bringing in raw files.
Yeah. But
That's good then.
yeah, but
But it
the,
was
But I had
also-
the
no
late-
trouble.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but when
the-
I uploaded and download whatever, they were both JPEG and RAW, and now on this camera, it's only JPEG. So you're right, it's probably the camera settings or the software settings.
yeah, definitely check your camera settings to make sure you're shooting in JPEG and RAW. And if nothing else, look on the card and make sure that you have a RAW file on the card itself. That will tell you whether you're shooting JPEG or RAW. And you should see them one right next to the other, the
Right.
RAW photo and the JPEG. So that'll tell you whether the camera is set right. If the camera is set right, then it's could be the app bringing it in.
Hey,
May
Tony,
not be bringing in both.
Tony,
or-
Jeff, Tony, since I'm a Canon user, there's a specific for Canon, roadmap for the format of the back file. So everything before like the 2018, that's called CR2 for raw file
Right.
extension. So right now it's a CR3. So absolutely your CC6 doesn't support CR3. You need to use a conversion software. They need to convert to what's called the I think the CN something. CN what's called CN something. It's a media common format, then convert to CC6 support format. So there's a problem with that. You may take care.
Right.
Okay,
Right,
thank you
yeah.
again.
Yeah. So
And if
you're
it was,
definitely
if
going to have problems with some
he
of
had the
that.
raw file there, though, you ought to see a sidecar also.
Right.
And he's
Right.
all he sees is a JPEG, doesn't see a sidecar, doesn't see
So-
a raw. Something's
So
bizarre.
your first step is to look at your card itself through your Finder window to see if you've got RAW and JPEG showing up on your card itself. You could skip using Canon software and just copy the files right from the card to your computer, and that would make sure that you get everything into your computer right. But if it is a CR3, CS6 is not going to be able to read it, and neither will Bridge. You would need to use the Canon software to be able to look at the file and convert it either to a DNG or a TIFF file or something like that, or even to a full-size JPEG. So if you're looking to use Photoshop, I would probably say, and I don't tell a lot of people this, but I would just shoot in JPEG. And the JPEG files work pretty darn well in these new cameras, the dynamic range. And Marty, I think, will agree, as he's got this big grin on his face because he shoots all JPEG.
I've been saying this for years. In fact, the one guest speaker we had out at the conference, he shoots sports, and he said the same thing. That's all he shoots is JPEGs.
Yeah.
No, we can do with these bigger JPEG files. There's not a lot that you can't do with them that you can do with a raw file anymore. I mean, that wasn't always necessarily the case, I would admit. Still never kept me from doing that. But, like when I had my 10D and I had a 6 meg file, well, our JPEG files are 24, 25, 26 megs or bigger, depending on your camera. I mean, there's a lot of information there. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
my 2 cents.
So yeah, shooting JPEGs, they certainly have their point, and I shoot RAW for a lot of the stuff, but I'm not turning it around that same day. like Marty may have to do. So, and I don't have a problem processing them in Lightroom, which lets me turn things around quick. So Tony, at least you have a number of different options to look at to try to figure out how to get it to work. Hopefully that will, you know, solve some of your problems, and let us know how it works next month.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
No problem.
Yeah, Tony, if you need it, you can send an email to me if you want.
Sure. I'm just looking in the comments, and we got, would you say both Topaz Denoise and Topaz Sharpen are important for workflow? I have only Denoise and wonder should I get Sharpen as well. I only use Topaz Denoise, and I use that only in specific cases where I shoot high ISO. I do not use Topaz Sharpen. I understand it's a pretty good product, but it all depends on how good your photos are coming out now. If your photos are coming out fine, I don't tend to use these extra plugins unless I know I have a problem with the image. If the image is looking good without extra sharpening or denoise, I leave it. The least I have to process an image, the better, as long as you're turning out a good quality image. And yeah, Jeremy, you were talking about Tony Kuiper's luminosity masks for sharpening. Yeah, that probably would be a good sharpening one.
Yeah, it does.
Luminosity
It does output sharpening, and I use it all the time. In fact, I do very little sharpening of my images anymore while I'm working in them, unless I had a problem the other day with a little bit of camera shake on an image that I really liked, and I cleaned it up in Photoshop. But you specify the size of the photo that you want to export to JPEG or whatever, and you put in the percentage of sharpening, and so it sharpens it proportionately to the size that you're exporting. And I found I don't really need to do sharpening in the product anymore, because it does a really good job of output sharpening, and I just use that.
Okay.
Can I just comment on Topaz Sharpen? I use it, and there are times when I find it amazing to use in a final product. Sometimes you'll look at a bird picture and maybe the eye is good, but you shot with a slightly lower shutter speed than you needed, and the bird moved a little bit, and there's just a little blur. And I know that photographers, if they don't see a sharp eye, they're like, oh, that's a terrible photo. But that Topaz works amazingly well, and it does have a mask. So instead of sharpening everything, you might just sharpen just that bird's eye and maybe its head. And some of the things that I've had to sharpen where, if you're doing a picture with kids, let's say, and one kid moves too fast and you got to bring it back a little. The Topaz Sharpen is really quite good. ON1 has also added that into their noise feature, and theirs is good. I don't think it's quite as good as Topaz's yet.
Yeah, I think one clarification we can use when we're talking about sharpening is that there is input sharpening and output sharpening. And I think the sharpening that most of the people here are talking about is input sharpening, where the image comes in and you're sharpening it in Photoshop or Lightroom or one of the products. And it's to enhance the sharpening of the image itself, like he was just talking about. But all images need most all images need output sharpening too, depending on the size that you're exporting it to. And everybody knows that digital images need a certain amount of sharpening, but much of that can be handled with export. And so unless the image has a problem with the shake or a little bit of blur or trying to get that eye sharper like he's talking about, I don't think most good focused images need a lot of input sharpening. And sometimes people will do input sharpening And then if they go to output it, it can get over sharpened when they, depending on the size that they're exporting it to.
Right. Yeah, you got to watch all that stuff coming in and going out. So, okay, well, we're going to move on to the main topic of the day that I know a lot of us are interested in. It's 11 o'clock, and I see Don made it. Thanks, Don, for coming. I could see a lot of drones in your background. You can unmute yourself, Don. We bring everybody in muted, and then we've also got Linda here that's going to be helping with some of it. I guess she's
All right,
the
am
one
I
that,
in now?
You're in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you now.
I've only knocked down 3 drones doing that.
Oh no.
Hey, buddy, what
So-
about that wallpaper?
This is not wallpaper. This is an actual wall of drones. And the child, of
Interactive.
course. Most definitely. We can bring down the Millennium Falcon and bring him in
Oh wow.
close. We've got the X-Wing fighter drone. We're losing props too. That's why they're up on the walls now. This is like the history, I guess.
That
From starting with drones, I've got the tiniest one here that I've ever flown. I'm gonna get a little closer there.
wow.
Huge.
It's got a broken prop. Those props were the hardest to ever find in your carpet. If you lost props on this little drone, they were gone. They were gone.
Wow. Wow. Well, it looks like quite a few different. So how long have you been flying drones?
I have been flying since 2015, so about 6 years.
Wow.
But commercially, well, as soon as the Part 107 came out, I ran to take the test to be able to do commercial work.
Okay. That's great. So you do a lot of commercial work with the drones? What are you photographing? Buildings or land or?
So I've started out doing real estate, real
Okay.
estate mostly. Then gearing into what we could do with drones, we can do live mapping now, making 3D models of an entire trailer park or a business and their lot.
Wow.
Trying now, just drew a blank.
Shooting some cell towers. You're doing a lot of other commercial work too, though, aren't you, Donnie?
Cell towers, absolutely. We did inspecting of transmission lines out in California in the mountains. That was one of the most fascinating jobs that I've done so far. Not so much for the drones as to where we had access to up in the California mountains. And on one hand, that was beautiful and amazing. On the other hand, when you've seen smoke from a wildfire come up over another mountain, you're thinking, hey, it took me an hour to get back here. Which way am I going out? It makes it real as well.
Yeah, I bet. So attendees, please put your questions in for Don and Nat. I know we have people on the panel that undoubtedly are going to have a ton of questions too. Did you have anything that you wanted to show or talk to us about right off, or you just want to answer questions, Don?
The first thing I guess that I want to put it out there is it scared me to death all week thinking I'm coming in here talking to people as an expert. I'm far from that. And I rely on a drone community for answers that I may not know right off the bat. So a little scared about taking some questions here about what we do, but in going out and just getting an address from a client and saying, can you go fly here? And then just being able to look that up online, seeing if we're able to fly there, just some of the things you might run into with doing that. you look at your air map and your airspace or clearance from the FAA or close to an airport or what. But then you have buildings that are federal buildings and schools, playgrounds, things that aren't even at your address that you kind of have to look for. I'm not going to be able to take a full 360 shot of a building next to a school during school hours. So a whole lot into it. And I can answer a lot of how we go about getting those answers. But like I said, I guess expert or just something of that sort. I don't like to put myself
Sure.
into that life.
No problem. We're a friendly group of people here, and I know a lot of us are really interested in either getting started with drones. I mean, I keep looking at it. I've been a commercial photographer for 40 years, and I looked at it when they first came out, and I constantly look at it, and I haven't put it in mainly because I haven't had the time to get the 107 license, but maybe we start there. How hard was it to get the license to
I would
do the
I would
commercial
almost
work?
take that back and say you don't really have to get that Part 107 to start flying a drone and enjoying the pictures that you can take from those. And even with
Right.
the small tele, you don't have to invest a whole lot. Now, when I first started flying and we got these little bitty drones, this thing you had to be able to control from the moment it took up off the floor. And even though this was $39 and was like, I couldn't even control it. It came up off the floor and the first thing it did was flew right into the wall. And I was like, okay, well, maybe this isn't the career path for me. But as and it was probably 2017, I might be wrong, but the Tello drone came out and the stabilization using the technology on the drones, this thing can tell how high it is up off of the floor and it can keep itself stable. So as long as I can bring this drone up off the floor and it stays where it is, now I can give it a command and tell it to go forward, up, back, left, right, and start taking pictures. When I can't fly that drone, it comes up off the floor and it's flying into the wall or the dog. Yeah, I can't even create with that. So it might be the Tello as well is only a $99 drone. That's where I went with. It's a lot less expensive. It will do basically what these larger guys do. This is the Phantom 4. It's going to come up and stabilize. But you fly this in your house, you fly this around houses. Unless there's no, and there goes the other drones. But you can get into the hobby. You can do it pretty cheap and without breaking a lot of stuff. The Tello drone has the prop guards on it, but you can also take the prop guards off of it once you get a little bit better, and that gives you a little bit more speed as well. Then you get up into those $1,000 drones with the Mavic and the Phantom and the commercial grade high quality pictures that the clients want for mapping and such. That's where we get into the expenses.
Sure.
You were talking
sure.
about inspecting the lines in California. It made me think of when I first got my drone. One of the first things I did was inspect the gutters in my house and look at my roof.
Did you clean the leaves off? Well, maybe not out.
I found out I didn't need to. I saw that my gutters were pretty clear.
Right. I'll do the driveway out there. And that's actually practicing with my drone. I was out there and just kind of flying around the yard. That's actually not where I would first tell you to practice with your drone. But as you get a little better and you're like, okay, I don't want to hit trees or anything. I just fly it around in the yard around the trees, and it happens to blow the leaves and stuff off the driveway as well.
Are you recommending that because of the trees, or because that's what I started doing too, and I learned to maneuver around the trees and stuff? Was that your point?
So the first thing that I'm going to relay to someone is get up above the trees with your drone. That way there's nothing to hit. The trees are probably the tallest obstacles unless you've got some transmission lines around your house or something. Trees are going to be the highest obstacle. So once you get above trees, then play around with your drone up in that airspace. Don't go all the way up to 400 unless you have to. 400 feet being the legal limit that we can go to with the drones. Depending on what you're doing, you can go higher and get authorization for that. But I think one of the first things that I read that at first didn't make sense to me was if you're new and you're flying your drone and you get into trouble, go up. And I did not understand. I was like, go up. Why? I don't understand. You're not going to hit anything above the trees. When you're coming down and trying to handle your drone and maneuver it in, and you're panicking because you're new to flying, that's when you're going to hit that wrong control button and fly right into a tree or your house or your car.
Twice. I've hit trees twice now.
I have a whole box of props from trees that have grabbed me. I started writing what state they where I crashed the drone at. So this was the time that I went and got a kite, and I got the smaller airplanes and just started back over. But it's a really good lesson from all the trees, because one of the greatest things with these drones is they make it really easy to fly. You'll just sit in doing a real estate job. You'll sit in a driveway going, there's only one tree over there. I'm going to sit here and do my job. And you can get lazy, complacent, but guarantee you that one tree, that's when I crash. When there's one tree, they'll reach right out and grab you.
I found that I'm really afraid of flying over water. I've been very hesitant to fly out over the lake, but when I was shooting in September, I was in Portugal and we were on an island and I was with other people and I got a certain amount of confidence flying out over the ocean. But do you have any recommendations for getting over the fear of flying over water?
That's actually an amazing story there, because when I first got my drone, the water was the first place I went to. I have the Ohio River out here. But then I started meeting other guys flying, and they all had that same fear. They were like, I'm not taking my drone over water. And I was like, what, why? So I think that when I thought about it and I took my drone out, my biggest fear was my drone coming down and crashing on something. But over water, I didn't have to worry about that. If my drone came down, I was the one going to have a loss. And that's the way, to me, that it should have been until I learned what I'm doing. I don't want to risk my neighbor's car, my car, if we were going to lose it. So it was, let's take that drone over the water. But think about it, even though your drone has eyes in the camera, it really doesn't know if it's over water or over land or over a building or over a car. But as I say that, drone sensors, when you get really close to water, the drone sensors underneath the drone are trying to sense how far it is from the ground. When you get over a water reflective surface and you're close, that can throw those off a little bit, and it thinks it can go down a little bit more. So it's use a lot of caution when flying very close. I'm 10 to 20 feet above water is where you really need to be watching it.
One of my fears, I think, of water is the idea, and maybe this is silly, but I feel like if the drone goes down over land, I can retrieve it. If it goes down over the lake or over water, it's gone.
True. I know a couple of guys that have jumped in the river to get their drone. Then I actually got this drone right here is here goes the rest of them. This is a waterproof drone. I won it in a contest, and it put a GoPro underneath the camera. So while it's waterproof and all, I could fly it in the rain and in the snow. It did not handle like a DJI drone. And it would fly, but I did, this thing didn't really go underwater. It goes underwater to this point right here, which submerges your camera underwater. And then you can kind of float around, but then it can come back up out of the water. So it wasn't really, I am going in under the water, discovering what's around the river, and then flying back out. But this thing doesn't do very good upside down in the river. So I learned that one real quick. But that's also where I learned getting into drones. I got lucky and I got started with DJI drones, the Phantoms, the Mavics. And then I picked up a couple other kinds of drones, and that really put me to the point of how much control and how much comfort you'll have flying DJI drones compared to another one. They just, some of them don't stay as stable as the others. I guess that's my biggest point on that they're not as stable.
Don, what's the best brand that you recommend?
The best brand for DJI for drones?
Yes. What's the best one?
Definitely going to go with DJI.
Okay.
The Phantoms, the Mavics, they have so many different models of drones and price points. The Tello is made by Rise, but it uses the DJI technology with the infrared underneath it to be able to gauge how far it is. So it uses the same technology as the DJI drones. And I don't know that there are other companies trying to get up to speed with the technology. But these guys have been, for as long as I know, top of the game for the drone industry. They're running into a lot of issues with government bans, using them for government work.
Yeah. The second question for you is what's the best iPhone or Android app for show you the permission fly zone map or something? What's the app you use? What kind of app?
Okay, for looking at airspace.
Yep.
To where you can fly your drone, there are multiple apps. The FAA has one called Before You Fly, the letter B, number 4, letter U, and FLY.com. That one, there is Aloft, ALOFT. That one is a great one. There's a few others, and I could probably get a list over to you guys that show them, but I think AirMap is a good one as well. AirMap is probably one of the most user-friendly ones.
Thank you.
We got let's see, a question from Ken Bowman. Does the control for the drone tell you the elevation? Is there a way to be able to tell how high you are? I would imagine.
Absolutely.
I think from what I've seen with the DJI stuff, they have an elevation, and
you can see the elevation, the distance away from the home point where you are. There's a small map on the corner of your heads-up display on your phone, and that brings up using a phone on your controller or using like a iPad mini versus a full screen iPad, versus some of the controllers have smart controllers and they come with their own screen, which is helpful for that brightness. If you think about it, or some of you guys have already been outside flying with these drones, when you're just outside in the sun normally trying to look at your phone or do something, imagine that glare and you're trying to see numbers and where your drone is flying and the distance and elevation. So that really plays into how big of a screen that you use too. But your elevation will show up, the distance away from you, how much battery life you have left. It's like a line across the top. The battery line will tell you have a set point that you can put where At 30% or 25%, you want to get just an audible warning where it's going to beep at you and tell you, hey, we're getting close to the battery life ending. You need to bring the drone closer to home. But then on DJI drones, this is what I'm talking about. It even has a home button where if the battery gets to the home level, the drone will literally take over itself and start flying to the home point because that's all that's left in the battery. So it's going to try to bring itself home before you're doing it. You can actually cancel that out if you know what you're doing and fly it in, but you really kind of don't want to get yourself to that point with the batteries.
Right, right. And like you said in the beginning, you don't need the 107 license if you're just going to fly it yourself for just your own stuff. But you can't earn a living or earn any money selling those photos, right?
Right. And I believe the FAA puts it as no furtherance of a business of any type for commercial work. So, and that falls into some great categories where, like, I knew there was not really a 107 law out when I was flying my drone at first, but when I was flying down at the river, I was seeing some amazing scenes, so I recorded them. And it was just for me at that time, and that was my intent. But come down the road when the local TV station wanted clips and they were starting their drone program, I had a lot of stuff that I could sell them.
Right.
But the intent of those flights and that video was not to sell to them. It was done down the road. So you can kind of argue down multiple paths there with the gray areas.
Yeah, it can get a little tricky. I know I just sold a piece of property and I thought, oh, I'm just going to run out and buy a drone so I could get some shots of it. But I knew I'm not licensed. I could get myself in a lot of trouble just with even one shot from a drone. So I didn't even pursue it.
One of the funniest things about that is you really, you don't, I mean, you do want to be concerned with the FAA and those guys of doing commercial work without your license. But the guys that are going to get you are the other drone pilots that have their license that see that you did that, and they're just jealous that, you know, you got it, and then they're turning you in. So
I have one thing to say. You had asked earlier about the exam. The exam is lengthy, but it's information that's very important to know when you are flying in an airspace with other aircraft. So when I first started studying for my exam, I'm like, why do I have to know all this stuff? I'm just going to fly over combines. Why do I have to know the direction of an airport, whatever? I'm at a combine. So I sucked it up. I learned, I learned what I needed to learn, and I'm having a blast. And for commercial shoots that I do, it's been very beneficial. And I would think, since you're a commercial shooter, go get that Seminole, that 107. You will absolutely love the process and the images that you get from it. It's so way cool. It has brought a lot of fun into this old photographer's perception on having fun with photography again. No fooling. It's great stuff.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm tempted because I'm still the photographer that rents the airplane and goes up and photographs it from a plane. And
I want to do that.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, hiring a good pilot is really essential when you're doing that. But we also have limits that you could only go so low. So then you're using telephoto lenses because you're up at 500 or 1,000 feet, depending on what you're photographing.
Right.
So the drone stuff would make it so much easier to do a lot of the commercial properties that I used to shoot by plane. And yeah, I almost got my own pilot's license at one time, so I think I could probably pass the 107C because I know a lot of the ground school stuff, and that, heck, getting a drone license is just shy of getting a private pilot's license. You need to know all the same stuff.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
right before the 107 came out, that the way to go about it was to get your private pilot's license. But there was another step right in between there, the hot air balloons. Those guys
Oh,
had to
sure.
get a sports license, I think was the term.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Right. Right.
So I actually started hanging out, looked into my local guys. We have a big hot air balloon community here in Kentucky, and so I reached out to them. They let me come out and fly with them, but I was also wanting to learn what they knew and what I needed to learn to get to that license. But then the Part 107 came out, but and fortunately, I still get to fly with these guys in their hot air balloons and my drones around them. And those make for some fascinating photos and videos.
Oh, that sounds
yeah.
like it'd be a lot of fun. Got to be
They're amazing.
tricky, but a lot of fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've been flying with them for, I guess it's probably been 4 years or so now. And you can really, the hot air balloons are allowed to go higher than 400. So when you're flying with the hot air balloons, you have the time that they're inflating the balloon to the time that they're up and they take off. Once they hit 400 and above, they're floating away.
Yeah, and neat.
Now,
Yeah.
if you do very good, you can find where they're landing and possibly try to get your drone up before and take more. But chasing
Yeah.
balloons is a whole nother beast.
Linda,
Yeah.
you have a story about that. Don't you want to share?
What about the balloon?
Yeah.
Yeah, so where the Kentucky balloon groups go, Donnie is a legend there. So I show up there and they say, but you're not Donnie. And I go, oh, I know Donnie. He should be around here someplace. He was where they took off and I was where they landed. And one of them landed in a tree. And they said, well, every good landing is a landing that you can walk away is a good landing. I'm like, oh, all right. But yeah, so that was fun to get that spot. But Don's right. If you have access to any kind of a balloon organization in Wisconsin, take advantage of it because you get some spectacular images with a still camera on the ground or if a drone, if you're into drones. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey,
Yeah,
Don, what
Donnie's-
kind of the video editing software you use?
So with my old ground camera, I had gotten into Adobe Photoshop. So, but then as y'all were talking right before we talked about the drones, there was the subscriptions came out. And as I started doing real estate, the guys with the ground photos kept telling me that I needed to use Lightroom. And I was like, why? Photoshop, I can do everything I need to do in Photoshop. But that was the first time I started using, with real estate, obviously I've got a whole set of images and I wanted to use the film strip and edit all of them to be exactly the same. I had no clue about any of that. I just knew how to fly the drone up and take pictures. But there were a lot of people that pushed me towards, you have to use Lightroom. And I will actually ask your group this, if there's a preference over one or the other, but to me, Photoshop has been, I guess, what I started with, and I haven't found anything I can't do in Photoshop in Lightroom. So I guess Photoshop is my recommendation. But I do see the uses for Lightroom and how new users maybe, that might not be the right term, but it makes it maybe a little more user friendly in Lightroom for new people using the software. But I'm like the one guy said he has the whole subscription suite for video and everything.
I start
Sure.
in Lightroom, and then when I use all the sliders and that sort of thing and all the gradients, and then what I can't do, then I bring it into Photoshop and finish up there and do things
I've
like
heard that
luminosity
many
maps.
times. Utilize both, the best
Yeah.
of both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lightroom's great because you can do bulk batch processing of a lot of your images all in one shot over doing them one at a time. The only
Right.
bad part with Lightroom is it does not work well with videos. So you're still need the rest of the suite to do the video stuff. And that, so, and Premiere is, of course, one of the better video processing. One of these days, this group will probably start getting into all the different video processing, because I think this whole thing is starting to merge together. But yeah. Tony, you had a question.
You're muted. Oh.
Okay, the question I have is the cameras on the drones. What do they have cameras? Do you have to get a GoPro? What are they? And then what are the technical specs of the cameras?
Good question there. On that Tello, that $99 guy, this guy, I don't know if you could see it. He obviously has a camera, and you will be able to see you use your phone or your iPad to fly this thing with. You're not going to take anything that's quality. That's more for I can see where I'm at. You could literally go from your living room, fly it into another room, and see where you're at on there. That's more to me what that camera is for. That brings me, let me see if I even have it up here. I'll bring up the Phantom 4. To the camera on the Phantom 4, I'm going to bring it up a little closer so you guys can see that how it moves around on the gimbal there. So when you get into these the higher end drones, Linda may have a little bit more of the exact information on these as far as megapixels. I believe the Phantom 4 has I know it has the mechanical shutter, so we use it for mapping. When my drone's flying through the air and I don't want it to stop, but I want it to take pictures every 2 seconds so I can make a map later, I use this one with a mechanical shutter. The Phantom 4s have the mechanical shutters, whereas the Mavic drones, this one right here, I've got it folded up. The Mavic drone has the gimbal. This has the Hasselblad camera on it. That's all I can tell you is that everybody says that one's much better camera, much better quality. Something inside there is taking a much better picture for whatever spec reasons, I don't know. But it doesn't have a mechanical shutter. But to me, it still takes a great picture. To me right now, with my knowledge on cameras, which is not very much, I need to keep following up with the group. This camera I use for one thing, this camera I use for another. But if I'm just out taking pictures of some horses in a field, either one of these is going to work for high quality. I do believe they're both definitely over 20 megapixels. Linda might be able to.
That is correct, Don.
Okay.
Your Phantom 4 is a 20 megapixel camera. The Mavic 2, I think, is a 24, if I'm not mistaken. So it's up there.
Right.
And it's a smaller sensor, though. That's one thing to take into consideration. But
is it the Mavic that I believe had the 1-inch sensor, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's got a 1-inch
Right.
sensor. Yeah.
Marty, I found that doesn't really matter that much in my pictures, the smaller sensor. I was concerned about that in the beginning, but I'm finding that I'm doing a lot of stitching of panoramas. And when you get 8 or 9 or 12 images you put together, you get more megapixels in that than you get in a DSLR.
Yeah, Drama, you're absolutely right. I mean, that smaller sensor, don't let it scare you. I mean, remember, you're talking about a Hasselblad camera. It's at least Hasselblad's technology. So what DJI did was a number of years ago, they invested heavily into Hasselblad. They basically own a controlling share of the company. And that was to incorporate awesome cameras on their drones.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed when I first saw that. I was shooting in Utah with some other people's cameras, and I ended up buying the Mavic 2 Pro.
Right.
And that Hasselblad is an amazing little camera. My biggest problem right now, I've learned to fly it pretty well. I've learned to control it. They were even amazed on this last trip that I usually caught the drone, and they were recommending that I not do that because I'll eventually get cut. And my answer was, well, I better put some Band-Aids in my bag then. But my biggest problem is learning to control and getting the pictures at the right exposure. And I didn't have my controller set up to quickly change the ISO or to change that stuff. I
Oh,
had to
that
click
is-
on the menus. So
That is huge. I don't even want to change them if I have to go into the menu and slide this and that. It definitely get that controller set up where you can hit that little small button that says, decrease aperture or increase it, and doing it quick. The only thing I don't have on the quick control is ISO, which is probably the last thing that I'm going to adjust. So if I get to that point, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go into the menu and pull that up. I think you can even brand that up to a one of the control buttons as well.
yeah, I wish the histogram on the controller was bigger. It's such a tiny little histogram that I would like to make it a little bit bigger. But
Do you have what
smart
kind of controller?
Yeah.
I have the controller that comes with the Mavic 2 Pro, I believe.
You paid extra for the smart controller.
Yeah.
It's got the
Yeah,
smart
okay.
controller.
Yeah, that's making a
Right.
big difference. When I was shooting and I was learning in the spring, when I was in Utah, I was with people that had the phone on there. And we
Right.
got a really clear picture on our controller where they couldn't see what was going on, like you were talking about, Don.
Yes, that
And
glare.
therefore, when I
sun
got
glare.
my own drone, I got the controller too.
Absolutely.
have-
Those
I have-
are great.
I have the important question. If I'm out on the boat fishing and I want a beer, can I send my drone in to have my wife hang a beer on it?
I think there
It
was a
depends
bar in
on if you're
Wisconsin.
being charged for the beer or if you're getting the beer free.
A couple years ago, I heard a story about a bar in Wisconsin that delivered a 6-pack of beer to an ice shack. And I go, only in Wisconsin are they going to do that. But they did.
That's where I am, in central Wisconsin. But can you carry, transport small items?
So it is possible. I actually, the only thing I've really ever put on them is the little stuffed animal type thing that I've flown. But then I believe it came out in the Part 107 in the rules that you can't carry a payload of any sort without a certain kind of a waiver. I do magic and balloons, so I like to try to sculpt the balloons up that I could fly under the drone. And then being October, this was really stupid, but it was funny. My first year of having the drone, y'all know those large leaf bags that look like a pumpkin when you have them filled up.
Okay, yeah.
I filled one of those up, and it was huge. And I just tied a string to the drone, and I said, "We're going to make the Great Pumpkin rise," and it did. And it was so light that the wind caught it, and the pumpkin, after the drone stopped, kept going up and up and up. And luckily, the string came from underneath, around by the propeller. The propeller cut it, and I don't know where that pumpkin went to at this point. Wait, did you say this is going to be on YouTube? Can we edit that? No. That is the story of my first drone. They do have a home point. This is all that's left of that drone. It is still flying around the neighborhood up here.
Oh boy.
They said you set a home point and it's supposed to come back to you. And I was with one of my buddies in a field where it was my first flight. And I said, well, this is very cool. I can see where it is. I can see what it's doing. Let's fly over that row of trees right there. And as soon as I got it out of line of sight, the video feed lost as well, went away. And I did the first thing that a drone guy does when he doesn't know where it is. Well, hold on, I'll find it. And I hit every control and every So at this point, I have no clue where it really went to. My buddy said, wasn't it supposed to fly home? I said, yeah, we're going to wait here for about 5 minutes and then we're going to get drinks. And every now and then I go back over to that neighborhood with another drone and I just look around the trees. But
Yeah.
Tony, one thing you brought up was flying from a boat, and I'm hoping to go to Greenland next year to in 2022.
interesting lunch.
What?
An interesting way to fly.
Yeah,
off of
but
a boat.
I was told that it's really hard to fly from the boats there, the people that go up there every year, because you have to be really careful, because if the boat's moving, the home point moves.
Yes, absolutely. I learned that the hard way as well. So when your drone, you first start it up, you're going to set your drone down and you start it up and your drone records the home point. So you're in your backyard or somewhere else. That home point's not going to change unless you drive somewhere. But on a boat, we're already in motion, or we could be. Or once we take off, we could be in motion, and our home point wouldn't be the same as when we took off. And if you remember when I told you the drones will take over themselves when it gets to the point where it only has enough battery to return to its home point. So if you've gone a mile up the river and your drone is thinking that back here is the home point, your drone's going to stop up here and go, oh, wait, I got to go back to my home point. And they're going to fly back to a mile down the river there and try to land. But they do have that in the controllers now, and it's called a dynamic home point. You can keep resetting your home point. You can set your home point to where your controller is, depending on if you have a phone or your smart controller has GPS. Then you can tell it to just come back to where you're at. I don't trust none of that automated stuff, and I just keep it close and I keep telling it, new home point, new home point. When you're flying on a boat and taking pictures, until you're very used to it, pretend it's your first time flying and don't plan on taking 25 minutes worth of pictures and videos. Go up, take 5 or 10 minutes, take a few pictures, bring it back down. So you got the logistics of, even if you don't feel like your boat is moving and they're not moving, the engine's not even on, you're probably still floating a little bit. So coming back in and trying to land, you said you did a hand catch. That's going to be the best thing for on a boat, is hand catch and a hand launch. But as well, on your launch, and you're going to take off, you just have to remember you're moving. And the best thing that I can do is figure out which way you're moving and then aim your drone the opposite direction and be ready to fly it that way once it takes off from your hand. It sounds a lot trickier than it is, because obviously these Phantom 4s you can hold in your hand a little easier than you can the Mavic. But both, you can do it with either one.
Yeah, I was told that that one of the problems also is these are sailboats that we're going to be on, and so trying to maneuver it through and not hit the rigging of the sailboat. I guess practicing around trees might be good for that.
Very true, but I mean, so I'm trying to imagine on a sailboat, is that sail going to come whooping back around really quick? Or do you have a spot on there? I would find that spot on the boat, if there is, where you couldn't be hit. Maybe it's at the edge or the back. Or if
I think they're slow moving as far as the sails moving. I was thinking
Gotcha.
they have 2 sailboats up there, and I was told recently that they actually have people shooting on both boats, shooting the other boat. And so they will have sails up, just because the pictures have to look
Right.
nice with the sails. But I was picturing when they talked about it that it wouldn't have sails, that it's just the wiring and the rigging that you have to worry mostly about.
Right. Get most definitely now your Mavic has obstacle avoidance on it as well. That can, in certain scenarios like that, that can be as much of an issue to you than not. Because the thing is, something swings in front of it or your drone gets close to something, it's going to lock up for a second. And that, whatever it is, if it's a moving boat or something and it's not there anymore, and you want to bring your drone back in and land, you could end up causing yourself to not be able to control it, and it's sitting there again, maybe waiting to get hit. So I'd almost turn off obstacle avoidance in that case. But
Well, that's a good point. I need to learn to do that quickly because I've been in my front yard. I've tried to bring it in to my front porch and land on my front porch, and it refused to do it. So
and
I
it stops right there at the roof, right?
and sometimes when I'm hand catching, I have to not put my hand underneath it until the last minute and go and grab it because it'll go back up when I put my hand underneath it.
Well, and as well on a hand catch on a Mavic, it wants to sense, like if you put your hand up and you move it, then it's going to obstacle avoid that. That's why you have to keep that hand very still. It's going to come down. That's that pause it does right there. And it's sensing, is that object moving or not? And as long as it don't move, that's when it'll let it come on down into your hand. And that's what the drone's doing at that point.
Oh, interesting. So I need to
And
learn.
that will still do that even if you turn obstacle avoidance off, because that's more of the landing safety.
Oh,
Which
really?
could be a setting I think you can turn off too.
I'm finding that the documentation for the drone, when I first got it, I was surprised at the lack of documentation of how to control things in the controller, and the drone is not that good.
You got instructions with yours? I think, oh, actually, yeah, this will actually illustrate your point very well. This was the first documentation that I had. This said on your controller, that tells you what your lights mean. If they were all red and all green, if they flashed yellow, your home point was set. Yeah, the Phantom 2. That was, and I don't think that any drone that I've gotten since has had very good documentation. But I also believe that may be in the world that we live in, that we know we can go to YouTube and somebody's got that on there. To learn how to do something such as this.
So you recommend going to YouTube? I thought it was just me and that I wasn't finding the documentation or something, but it's not me, huh?
No. And there's, for those that aren't a
problem.
part of it, there's a huge drone community online, on Facebook, and I'm sure on the other social media outlets and forums. But there's this group. That's where I go to with the, hey guys, I got to fly near this airport and I really don't know what to do. And while there are the regular butt heads of the internet, there are the few that are very helpful and will help you. I would, in my own experience, I went to the national groups and found the resources. And some experience, like what it looks like you guys have here with your photo group, your group itself could be resource for each other on that as well. You know, if Linda has a gig coming up, or if I have a gig coming up that I just want to bounce off, hey, I'm looking at this and I want to see if I can fly there. What are your thoughts? Maybe she'll look at that map on AirMap or Aloft and just give me that second, okay, yeah, it looks like you're good to fly there. Or no, hey, what about this that might be in that area? It gives you a little bit more of a confidence on where you're flying, because flying your drone, especially at first, is stressful to begin with, let alone to know where you can fly. So if you can get where you're flying and be okay to flying over the water and the empty part, then you don't have to focus on that as much. Then you get to focus on that camera once that drone's in the air and the camera's steady.
So I ran into an instance last week, and I had to call my drone expert, Linda. I'm like, help. So I've been flying about 2.5 years now, and I've never ran into this, but I was shooting a building right in Stevens Point, about 3 miles from the airport. It's a Class G airport, so there shouldn't have been an issue.
Right.
But
You know where we're going, don't you?
my controller
DJI?
said you can't. DJI said you can't fly, even though before you're flying off said, hey, you're good to go, good airspace. You know, DJI said not going to let you fly this thing. And
Yes.
what I figured out later on, I didn't tell you this, Linda, but so I did some screenshots of the area and the runway paths. I was directly under a runway path, even though I wasn't in the airspace, so to speak. It wouldn't.
The blue rectangle.
Exactly. Yep. I don't know if we can see it or not, but so that blue field there, the red dot down in the lower part is close to where I was. The blue dot is actually where I was, and it just wouldn't let me fly there because I was over the runway, not or in the flight path to the runway, not actually in the airspace. So I'm like, Linda, what do I do? So there's really nothing I could do at the time. I need to get together with Linda and go through this process. You can request permission from DJI that I can do an override for that. And Drama, you kind of alluded to that earlier too, but you know, in the 3 some odd years I've been flying it, it's never happened to me. I always had green triangles and I was always happy.
Yeah, my house is in the 400-foot Class C zone, and I've been flying. The drone let me fly up to 198 feet, I think. But I went to a park that was about 2 blocks from my house, and I guess that went over from the 400-foot zone to the 200-foot zone. And I was going to take some pictures in the little lake in this park, and it wouldn't take off. And I wasn't sure if there was a way to override that or not. But
Yeah.
You saying that would take contacting DJI?
One of you guys want to explain that?
So DJI is the only company that they felt the stress of, hey, we've got guys buying drones at Best Buy, and they're taking them to these zones near airports and highly sensitive areas, and just going up and flying them, and you know that obviously is going to be a risk to our country and infrastructure and things like that. So DJI, I guess, took it upon themselves to create their own geofencing. So you could literally have authorization from the President of the United States, the FAA, Walmart, and the owner of the trailer park you're flying in, and your great little drone you got from DJI, the top of the line, the best ones on the market, is going to tell you, nope, you can't fly. And you're like, what the heck? Why not? I've got permission from the president. But to touch on exactly where both of you guys talked as well, I spent about 5 years not having to do a custom unlock, which is what we're talking about here. Linda got to do one first here when we had our state fair. So that's actually, I jumped in and went, I need to help. I need to figure out how to do this myself because I'm going to run into this. And Linda had to run through the process herself. But then I found myself a month or two later, actually just about a month ago, having to fly close to Washington, D.C. It really wasn't that close to Washington, D.C., but there's like this huge ring around DC that DJI says, unless you put in a custom unlock in, you can't fly there. So they have their own map. And if you want to write this down for looking this up, it's DJI Fly Safe GeoMap. I'm not sure if you do a search for that there. It's the fly safe zones for DJI. You go in there, you will put in the your account number and stuff, your drone, and where you want to fly at. So you actually have to know this previously if you want to get an unlock. So Linda had to do this for the fairgrounds, and the where you were talking about the runway, the blue zone that shows up on this map is a long blue rectangle, and it's like, DJ, I want you to get an unlock to fly there. You can do two different kinds of unlocks. That one is an area unlock where you would click on that blue spot on the map and tell it you want to fly in that zone. A custom unlock would be same thing. You want to fly right there, but you probably want to fly a little bit extra around, and you just making your own created circle or polygon for the area that you want to fly in. But DJI makes this process seem a lot more difficult than what it really is. When I actually had to do it my first time, I had to tell them they want to know where you're at, draw that circle, and then upload a document showing authorization that I was okay to fly there. And I didn't have a letter from the president. I didn't have a letter from the FAA, other than having the unlock. But I did have a screenshot of the map on Google Earth that I wanted to fly in. And I uploaded that map in where they have this documentation that they want. And within 15 minutes, they unlocked the area. So I spent about 5 years being scared of this process, only to go up here in Virginia and finally got to go through it, do it. Now I'm all like, oh, that's nothing. But I know what that felt like on the other side of it. I was like, I don't want nothing to do with all that. But it's really, really easy. Just another few steps you have to do to go through DJI. And while it annoys me, I'm almost on the side of, well, at least somebody who just went and bought a drone from Best Buy isn't going to go over here and fly it next to the damn airport or some other unsafe area that's going to cause a bunch of trouble. And we know there's troublemakers out there. So
Question
I
for you.
kind of, I'm on both sides of it.
Question for you about that. Are you able to unlock because you're doing commercial or whatever, or can anyone, like, for instance, me, if I wanted to do something, for non-commercial, just for my own satisfaction to take pictures?
I want to say, and I can't remember for sure, but I want to say that you should, there was never anything on there that said, are you a 107 pilot for the DJI zone? Because some of those zones are actually old land areas that were marked as airports. And they just put a spot over. So I do believe, and I can double check that, but I'm pretty sure that recreationally or Part 107 can go in and unlock zones.
I don't know about
But you're
that. I
not-
know with the waiver process for FAA, we do have to put our commercial license in on that one to get authorization.
Absolutely.
And then to have
That's
that
where I was going with
authorization.
that. You're not going next to an airport and unlocking. You will be able to unlock a zone that's, maybe a warning zone, but you're not going to get, they have the yellow, blue, and red areas as far as like tiers of what you can and can't unlock without certain permissions.
Do you pay commercial fees? I had almost all of the parks and open space here in Milwaukee County is a Milwaukee County park, and you're not allowed to fly. And I went into one of the parks and I wanted to shoot just a waterfall, just get a little bit above the tree line. And so I went into the nature center, and the biologist came out and talked to me, and he said he didn't think it would be a problem flying a drone in the park, but the headquarters wanted to know who was flying. And so he gave me the email address, and I emailed the headquarters for the parks, and he came back And he said, well, yeah, we can give you a permit to fly, but it's $76. And I said, well, I'm just a recreational flyer out taking pictures. And he said, you still need a commercial license, which they charge professional photographers to go in and shoot
Right.
the park.
I have heard that. I have heard that. And that goes along the lines of, I was just recently introduced myself. I had no clue that photographers were going around trampling all over this stuff. And it's become a, now companies or corporations that are like an interest of me to go take a picture of, they now want a fee from me to come on site. And I'm on both sides of that because I know the photographers that are out there not really caring about other people's experiences. Or on the other hand, in some of our parks, they have paid that fee and now they think they own that area or something. So it's, I don't know, buying lack of respect in some cases.
These fees were for an event, were like event photography, and they wanted it for one day. But as a photographer, I'm going to wait until the sky is and the light is perfect for the photograph, which you don't know which day that's going to be on. And so having to pay for a specific day, it was a little unreasonable. And I would think that if you have
doesn't make sense for a photographer.
For a professional photographer, you know what day you're going to be out there. Do you just put those kind of fees into your cost for your business?
I haven't had to yet, but I guess I was trying to think of what I would do in that scenario. In that scenario, I'm going to try to buddy up and be the best friends of whoever runs that, so that they can understand, or maybe it's a bit of educating them to understand that, listen, I'm a photographer. I don't just want to come up and get a picture of that fountain. I want that sky to be right. I need the lighting to be right, the shade. And it's can we work out a deal where I'm able to come up and do that at any given time rather than in the parameters of your thing? Maybe that'll lead to them realizing that's what more experienced photographers will need, because a lot of them are just we see the waterfall here and they're up with their iPhone or whatever and taking the pictures of it. But I haven't had to. There's the funny thing is the parks around, they say we can't fly our drones in. I wanted to bring that up because the biggest thing is a park can't really stop you from flying above it. They can stop you from launching or landing inside of it. So the airways, if the airways are clear, and you can still do this job respectfully and be off property, you're not really breaking any rules. But I know it's sometimes harder to see where your drone is and drop down and get that right shot from off property. You're trying to keep your drone in sight as well.
You just better not crash it there.
That's right. That's right. Watch out for that tree with the grabbing arm.
Yep.
What Donna's alluding to, so the FAA controls the airspace, not a local municipality, not a local business. But you do have to follow whatever they're kind of, so the state national parks are saying, no, you can't fly here. Then, okay, you can't fly there. But if you're just outside of the park on private property or on a public road and you launch your drone, they really can't see, as long as you're traversing the area. You're not kind of just staying over it, or you're, there's just an awful lot of technicality.
That is where you would fall into privacy laws of, all right, now is it a point of a reasonable expectation of privacy in where you're flying around, and which of course in a park you're not. But like you're saying, if you're just hovering over a family trying to have a picnic there, and as ridiculous as it sounds, man, people are doing it. It's like, oh, look, I'm going to get a picture of the family. And the family's down there scared to death, wondering what this drone is because you're flying off property and they don't know where you are. So everybody's just a little scared, but you're getting that picture of the family.
One more thing on that aspect.
More laws.
at Churchill Downs, they don't want drones flying over them, but so you can't launch on their property, but people go to the little church across the street and launch there and
I know
fly.
that church.
So technically it's okay to do that, but as someone that works at Churchill, we're very fearful of these drones scaring horses. Now people will fly their drones over there, and management is furious all the time. There's another drone. Hopefully they will do it not in morning training when horses are training, because it could be horrible if a drone were to get too low and spook a horse, and when somebody's working with it. So that part, it's a catch-22. So yes, you can fly from the little church across the street and over to Churchill, and they don't like it. Legally, I think they're in their rights to do it. It isn't a no-fly zone, but you can unlock it. So
yeah,
it's tough.
I believe that Churchill probably in venues like that probably have a little bit of that, especially with the animals there at Churchill. There's got to be some protective laws and with the animals there, and that's a paid venue that people pay to come into, and if you're taking pictures or even flying your drone over that should fall maybe under that privacy thing of, well, you can't take pictures at the drive-in or, and show what people are paying to get in and see. I think that would be, but I don't know of the laws there, but I think that's where they should fall. And
any kind of an event like that, like for State Fair, stadiums, Churchill, there's a size one font someplace that you will be photographed. If you don't want to be photographed, you don't go to those places. So that gets you, and that gets me clear way to anything that I shoot at those places. It can go in for marketing.
True.
So there's a rule on that, and that's, I'm always very cautious of it. But attorneys have advised me, there's someplace that they will be, heads up, you're going to be photographed.
Right. And that's on the back of our tickets that when we go in, yeah, absolutely. So, but not so much maybe the customer coming into Churchill, but maybe Churchill has the legal authority to get some sort of a it's
I would
it's
bet
frustrating
that,
to even discuss it, because
yeah,
how hard it's going to be to catch the guys flying the drone.
I mean, we've seen this at major sporting events, baseball, football games, where some idiot flew their drone into the stadium or above the stadium or something, and more times than not, they do catch them. Now, this is all kind of running up to the new remote ID rules that are somewhat in place, will be fully in place by September of 23, but by that point, we'll have a much better mechanism in place to find people who are subverting the law, so to speak. It's all about common sense, a lot of it.
I wonder how many people we're going to find that are the ones that are following the law and they have that technology on their drone, or at that point, are people able to just 3D print a drone that doesn't have that technology and they still fly in rogue to these type of events and things?
Well, but the way that the rules are written, though, Don, is, at least the way I understood it, is, even homemades are going to have to follow this.
Gotcha.
Unless they're under 250 grams, but that's going to be the only caveat. Well, a Mavic Mini under 250 grams does about the same job taking pictures of Mavic 2 at 2 pounds or whatever it is. So
right.
That's going to be technology is only going to continue to get better in miniature. Right. So, I think.
How long before this little guy's got a Hasselblad camera up in there somewhere, and then bam.
Right.
These rules.
They're gonna be fluid. They're gonna change with the times, but it is kind of scary. The downside is it makes it harder for all of us who do want to do this legitimately to do it, because there's so many yahoos out there that are just not playing by the rules, and the more that happens, the harder it'll be for us. You know, and then you throw into the mix the big companies that are going to start doing deliveries with these drones. They're going to want to control the airspace. They aren't going to want to have to worry about me flying my little Mavic. They want this big drone to come over and deliver a package to my neighbor. You know, that's going to be probably the biggest challenge of all of this.
Well, I mean, those guys have, that was a rumor a few years back, you know, Amazon wanted to regulate a certain altitude in the sky for all of their drone delivery needs and such. And it's been a huge, I still to this day call it marketing. And I do know that Kroger's is doing drone delivery up in Centerville, Ohio. But they're doing it within 1 mile of a country store, and they have to drop the packages. And I know technology is amazing. I know that there are going to be regions and places that drone delivery is going to be able to be done. And especially as technology advances and these are able to fly further on longer flights to get something to you. But literally and logistically, at what point of an emergency in your life do you need something drone delivered to you from Amazon? Let alone so that they couldn't bring on a van, or the way that they're DoorDash now is going to Walgreens every 10 minutes up here and bringing something by.
I get that. You know, I think it's going to really benefit the real rural areas are really going to benefit from that. In the cities, you're right. There's so much air traffic already that, I mean, just from small planes and helicopters that I don't ever see it fully happening there.
And then you got, you know, the people that think that they're going to get delivery packages to their house. You know, there's houses out here that don't have a opening of a spot where they can have their package dropped to. So while we might have drone delivery at some point, you might be going up to the corner spot where the drone is capable of coming in and dropping a package. So are you really getting drone delivery to your house, or you got to go out somewhere and get it anyway? So I haven't believed of the big guys doing that. But they are doing it with emergency services, with the hospitals in rural areas. And that's fascinating, and it's great that it's working. But for the people that see it on the news, and UPS just got approved for drone delivery, I just don't see it happening as mainstream as what they kind of portray it.
Yeah.
I have a
And
question.
yes, airspace.
I have a question before we sign off here. I think we're getting to the end.
Yeah, we're going to have to start wrapping up.
We can talk for 2 more hours, you guys.
I've done a lot of night photography, and I haven't taken my drone out at night yet, or even at twilight. Do you have any recommendations or advice for night flying?
So that first part that you added in, twilight flight, that is legal. But after civil twilight, 30 minutes before the sunrise or 30 minutes after the sunset, you're not allowed to fly without a waiver and strobes on your drone with three statute mile visibility. They sell them on Amazon. But are you talking more on settings of the camera or flight of the drone?
Flight of the drone.
Okay. Get very used to your lights and knowing which direction your drone is heading at all times up there, because if you do get a spin around, then knowing that your red lights are on the front of it, or the green lights are on the back, or if you are like me, I turn mine off. You have the Mavic 2. It also has a spotlight underneath it that you can turn on. That's not going to give you a sense of direction, but on the Mavic as well, you have the app, the little map on the app that will show you the direction of your drone. So that's the hardest part in night flying, is which way is my drone heading? Which way is it facing, so that I know which way to fly it back to me. That's probably the trickiest part. So let me ask you, flying the drone in daytime, do you fly your drone out? When you fly it back to you, are you facing away from yourself or do you have the drone facing you?
Either.
Either or?
I've gotten to the point where I can control it either way, but I
Good deal.
typically fly it head on.
Very good. I see so many people that just want to do the, oh, I'm done flying. I'll hit the return to home button. And then they let it come in automatically. I don't trust that, but I guess it works for some people. But then there's people that want to bring their drone in and they fly it. And I used to do this, but they want it to fly with that camera facing forward. So you're out and you're in the field or whatever, and you're flying it facing forward. But now when you're coming back to yourself, flying it back, your controls are opposite because your drone's not flying facing that way. Those of you that do fly that will understand that knowing which way your drone is oriented, that's which way your sticks are going to respond. So if you go left with the drone and your drone's turned around, your drone's actually going to go right. This is the biggest cause of most accidents. And if there was one tip for all drone flying, I literally do this when I'm out flying. I'm going to stand up. I'll probably come off camera. When you're flying and your drone is facing this way, you stand facing that way. If your drone is out there and your drone is turned around facing back this way and you're shooting, turn your body around and face the way that your drone is facing on the ground. And that's going to be the best way for you to keep track with left, is right, and so forth. So that's going to be the biggest, most confusing thing, turning your drone around and then them sticks get reversed. And then you're like, oh. In an emergency, your instincts are going to go, oh, I need to go left. Boom, your drone's going to go right.
Jeff, we might have to do we might have to do a part 2 of this.
I love it. I've only gotten through half the drones. I thank you guys for having me here. I definitely want to ask you guys about questions about like the ground camera. So I'm going to join up here every time that I can and start learning a little bit about those cameras myself.
Well, we'd love to have you come, and anytime you want to come in and watch, feel free to do that.
Their invite was that wasn't a time sensitive one, was it, Jeff?
No.
It showed me a calendar, so I think I got one for all of it.
You'll be
sneaking in from now on.
Yeah. So a couple of things as we start to wind this up, since we are 20 minutes over already, is do you have any suggested YouTube sites or places to learn this stuff more?
Remote Pilot
maybe you
101.
could send me a list of good sites that we can direct people to, because I know
absolutely
there are good sites out there and there are bad sites out there.
There are, and there's ways of learning. Some people like to watch videos and take tests. Some people want to read the actual Code of Federal Regulations and they can grasp all of that. There's multiple ways, but I used remotepilot101.com. They give you video sections. It stays current with as the laws change. They change those videos. It is a I think it's $149
For a
lifetime membership.
Right.
Lifetime. So the rules changed for your renewal this year for getting your renewal license, and they already update their videos on that site. That site as well has practice tests with very, very similar questions to the actual test. So you could practice test all day long until you're getting hundreds, and then you're ready to go take that test. But the FAA has stuff out. Yeah, there's a couple of different resources. Definitely.
Yeah, Pilot Institute. So Jeff, I can send you some. Don, if you want to send, you send them directly to Jeff or send them to me and I'll get them on there. Linda, if you got any favorites?
I used the same one that Don used. I went to Pilot 101. It was great learning for me. It nibbled it down to what I could do a couple nights, a week, a couple chapters or whatever. It broke it down into really itty bitty baby steps. It fit into my work life great. It's an awful lot of, pardon me?
I was gonna say, just to give everybody an idea on the 107 test, it's a 2-hour time limited test with 60 some odd questions, 60 questions. So it's quite
A lot of information.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would be that much information when I first started my journey in this. I said, oh, this is going to be great. Had I known, I'm like, I probably would have been spooked not to, because it's a lot of information. And once you get into it, you can understand why it's good information. But on the surface of it, you think, like I said, I'm just going to fly over combines. Why do I have to know all this? But once you get into it, you have a lot of respect for other drone operators. And, it's a great growth. It's a great eye-opening experience, and it's a lot of fun, tons of fun. You get to meet great people. Don's my mentor. He doesn't know that, but he's my mentor. Don, how do I do this? So I'm glad.
And she doesn't know that I'm learning from her at the same time. So it's perfect.
Yeah.
It is. We all learn from each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why we started this digital forum group. It's just for us to learn from each other, because we all have different experiences, different needs, and we work with different programs. And it's just grew out of that to something that we do the fourth Saturday of every month. And we all learn something usually. Even I learned something, and I've been doing this for 40 some years as a photographer. And I still learn stuff today. So it's a great forum. And look, we got people all across either the state here and now across the country. It's a great way to be able to learn.
Absolutely.
It's the one grateful thing with having Zoom, and maybe the one small grateful thing from COVID that popped out of it was the Zoom capabilities, so that we can learn a lot easier and all in one spot.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think with that, we're going to wrap it up for today. Don, we'd love to have you come back. Maybe one of these
anybody
winters
that wants to reach out and has any questions or anything, feel free. Definitely email or
Great. Yeah, we can. Would you mind emails, Don, if I pass along your email to the group?
Sure thing. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Okay. And Don, do you have a website or anything that you post stuff on? Or?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
No,
you have to work with Marty.
We're having an upcoming meeting about websites.
We're probably going to end up doing that one of these days here too, because we talk about websites all the time. Marty creates them. I've created them for some of our groups here.
Linda
yeah, so it's a nice thing to have. And Linda, do you have a website we can send people to just to see some of your
I'm
work?
at donephoto.com.
Okay. Great.
And I'm on Instagram, same thing. Don, you're on Instagram, aren't you?
Yeah, Magic Donnie on Instagram.
Okay. Well, that's a great place to be able to at least check you out and see some of the work that you're doing, because it's I don't do my Instagram. I've got one. I haven't done it in a long time. So
I always forget about it.
And
Twitter, I always forget about.
Yeah, hard to remember to do all these different things.
There's so much to do.
Yeah. You could just spend all day sitting at a computer getting all this stuff done.
Yeah.
Well,
this has been great.
Right.
Pleasure meeting everybody.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you both could be here today. And again, please come back anytime you want. If you have questions, we have a pretty good depth of knowledge around here, and glad to help you out, especially Don, if you're learning more stuff on how to do some of this. We are trying to get into a lot of different things. We're a very general group, so.
Sometimes we get talking Mac specific questions or PC specific questions. So we get beyond photography sometimes, for better or worse.
Yep.
Good deal.
Yep, I'm the Mac person. There's a few PC people in the group. And I'm a Photoshop Adobe guy. But there's the Luminar people and On1 people and a lot of other stuff. So we're trying to expand this group, and today we had 30 some people. During the winter we get 50 some people. So
Right.
and we get a bunch of people that end up rewatching this on YouTube. So because it will be
Right.
posted on the YouTube site. So hopefully that's okay with everybody. So I guess I'm going to wrap it up and say thanks to both of you for coming today. It made for a very interesting discussion on drones, and I know we only scratched the surface. So hopefully we get you guys back and we can talk some more on it, because I think all of us are pretty interested in the drone stuff.
Yeah,
So
very
with
good
that,
presentation.
Bye.
Thank you.
we'll see you guys next month. I don't know what we'll be talking about. It's going to be, I believe, Thanksgiving weekend. So I don't know how many people we will have showing up, but hopefully we'll see a few of you here next month. And hopefully you guys can all get some great fall color. So thanks for coming, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.